Professor Hama, as an expert of the economic issue, how do you view an announcement of the settlement of accounts in the business year ending in March of major companies?
Well, the figures are good. There's no doubt about that. But it's equally true that all of this good news is very, very much China-related or China-driven. So the question becomes, how long will this Chinese boom be sustained, and the related Japanese situation be sustained? If the Chinese mishandle their economy and their boom leads to overheating and then to a sudden collapse, then the Japanese recovery would have proved to be very short-lived indeed as well. So it's a very precarious situation we have on our hands at this moment.
Automobiles, consumer electronics, and the high-tech industry recovered achievements and developed a profit. It seems that the nation's banking system is also gradually regaining stability due to its business recovery. And share prices went back up to around 12,000 yen for a while. What do you think about the series of recovery signs?
Okay, well, all these companies must surely be heaving a sigh of relief that at long last, it is sales expansion which is generating profits. Up until now, it has very much been restructurings and cost cuttings which had resulted in some decent profit results. But okay, sales are expanding now. But again, one has to go back to the fact that all this sales expansion is actually very, very much due to external factors. Again, China very much for one. But also to a lesser extent the United States. So, in that sense, so far so good, but the key question is how long is it going to be able to go on for, and how will the industrial companies be able to make a virtue of the situation, to go in to reinvent themselves, as it were, and to become more efficient entities. So far so good, but what lies ahead is very much up to these companies. And as for the financial sector, it is actually interesting that even in the financial sector, what is happening at the moment is really very much a result of external factors. The companies that the banks are lending to are performing better now because of these external China-US factors. So therefore, no new added non-performing loans for the banks to worry about. The bank's balance sheet starts to look better, so on and so forth. So again, it is very much not internally driven, but externally driven. So in a sense, all of Japan is actually at this moment very much dependent on kamikaze, godly winds. And, these godly winds do have a habit of changing directions very suddenly. These are very fickle things. As indeed we already saw in the movement of the stock market in recent days. So, it is very much in that respect, fingers crossed time. Japan is not deciding its own fate by its own internal powers at this moment.
The issue of the rebuilding of Mitsubishi Motors Corporation has lately attracted attention. Will it be a serious cause for concern of the Japanese economy?
Well, it is certainly a huge problem for Mitsubishi Motors and the Mitsubishi Group as a whole. However, over and on top of which, it is, in a sense, a very representative of how far wrong corporate governance has become, how far wrong things have become in terms of Japanese company corporate governance. Japanese companies have been for very long renowned for their quality control. They were not supposed to make mistakes. And therefore, the problem is that once they started to make mistakes, the immediate instinct was to actually hide their mistakes rather than to admit them. And so all this led to cover-ups and papering over the cracks and so on, which in turn led to greater inefficiency and greater degeneration of internal health in terms of these companies. So that is very much what was happening pretty much across the board in Japan, and this really, I think, crystallized itself in what happened to the Mitsubishi Group and Mitsubishi Motors. So really the hope at this moment is that the Mitsubishi Group will be able to make a virtue of this very unfortunate, shameful turn of events and really look at their own internal governance issues and to go for a more efficient and more open, more transparent management of their affairs. That is the hope. And of course the other hope, which is the backside of that coin, is that they will not go the way the Japanese government has been going in these last months, if not years, of really becoming very, very interventionist and interventionistically trying to save companies and situations which are essentially unsavable, and therefore leading to even more greater inefficiencies, internal efficiencies in the companies themselves and indeed in terms of the whole of the economy. So really very much the hope is that the Mitsubishi Group will not emulate the Japanese government in that sense and let the markets essentially take care of future events. Again, it remains to be seen. It is really a pity. The Mitsubishi Group really very much once stood for integrity, if not for glitz and glamour, but all that is gone now with this. So it is a very sad state of affairs altogether.
The U.S. economy, which affects the Japanese economy, is recovering remarkably. So it's said that the U.S. might tighten its monetary policy in the future, and the fluctuation of the exchange rate of the yen and dollar and high crude oil prices would have a great influence of the Japanese economy. What do you think about these matters?
Well, the U.S. economy is really walking on thin ice. If you look at how a mere whisper of high interest rates has upset the New York stock market, you see that the situation is a very precarious one indeed. And of course, at this particular point in time, the prospect of higher U.S. interest rates actually attracting global money into the U.S. market and dollar assets. But this could actually very quickly reverse directions at any time if those very high interest rates themselves look as though they are choking off the recovery in the U.S. Everybody will be frightened out of the U.S. and the U.S. economy will be in big trouble. In all respects, there is no doubt that the U.S. in its twin deficits, as well as its very, very heavily indebted household sector, will be really a very key element of volatility and instability in the global markets altogether over the coming weeks and months. So much obviously is up to Mr. Greenspan, but what is happening in the U.S. actually, it looks like a recovery, yes, it looks as though the U.S. is leading the global economy once more, but it is an economy that is walking on extremely thin ice indeed. So we do have to watch them very carefully and be nimble on our feet and not be too dependent and too confident that the U.S. will lead us out of our problems yet again.
Major economic magazines and newspapers said that improvement in business performance, ongoing economic growth, and recovery of employment in major companies and so on. On the other hand, Japan is still in its deep deflationary pessimism, and corporations will continue to reduce redundant personnel in the name of restructuring. Professor Hama, how do you view the future of the nation's economy?
Well, again, the thing to be mindful of is that all the good news is almost exclusively China-driven. We are actually all parasites of China now in that sense. And this, of course, in turn means that what happens next is really very much up to the Chinese economic authorities. If they mishandle things and the Chinese economy collapses, all will be lost. And so the Japanese companies are now, in a sense, very much dependent on where China goes. And also the other problem is that Japanese companies are again very much squeezed between increasing costs and still continuing deflationary pressures at the very end of the supply chain, if you will. Costs are rising because of rising oil prices, and again, rising Chinese demand for raw materials across the board. However, companies are not able to pass through that cost increase onto their own price tags because Japanese people are simply not prepared to accept increasing prices when they are still suffering from low wages and so forth. So it is a very difficult squeeze situation that Japanese companies companies are facing, and those companies that are able to withstand that squeeze are well and good. They will do well, but on the other hand, those that cannot bear that squeeze will have to fall by the wayside. This particular recovery may be a recovery for the fittest, but it would actually spell death for the weakest. The traditional type of recovery, which results in rescue for all, seems to be something very, very hard to come by in this highly globalized world that we live in these days. That is the fact we have to be really keeping in mind. It is a recovery of sorts, but by no means is it a recovery for everyone and anyone.
Professor Hammer, thank you very much.